There's a lot of myths out there in violence prevention. Let's crush some of them today. Let's get started.
From the front lines of violence prevention, digging into the details that matter. Get ready for a 15-minute fast-paced information download that will prepare you to ask the critical question. When disaster strikes, are we good? Now, here's Jim Bennett.
Hey, thank you for joining us. You know, there's a lot of myths that are out there about violence prevention, and unfortunately, they don't really do us any type of favor. Because the problem is, as our coworkers, as our executive teams, or any of our leaders within our organization hear these pieces of information that in the end are not really true, it damages our credibility. It damages our movement forward in preventing violence in the workplace because they hear some fantastic comment that really is not based in reality. So what I wanted to do today was take some of these myths and start crushing them, basically going after them and showing that there is a difference of opinion out there and the best practices for talking to your organization, your executives, and moving your organization forward. So let's start with active shooter events are the most common form of workplace violence. Well, I think most of us can quickly say that's probably not the case, but that myth exists out there, and a lot of people say that. So according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, they account for actually a very small fraction of incidents. Physical assaults, threats, harassment, those type of situations are much more common. So it's important that we don't immediately just go to this mindset of, oh, it's active shooter, it's a shooting in a workplace. That's typical kind of workplace violence. Well, it's actually very, very rare. And so it is important that we have our information correct so that when we're talking about workplace violence, we don't only focus on weapons as far as firearms, that we're focusing on the big picture of what can happen. Different forms of assault, simple harassment against an individual. Those are the things that we need to keep at the forefront and as part of our conversation. The most common form of workplace violence is employee on employee. It's a myth. According to OSHA, really it is customer client against an employee. So those are those situations where it is that kind of outside force that's coming in or there's an interaction. I mean, this could be anything from being in a taxi where the fare ends up attacking the taxi driver. It could be the front counter in a business. It could be in a boardroom where you're meeting with other officials. Those incidents occur most of the time or more of the time than do the employee on employee type of assaults. Not that they don't occur. I don't want it to mislead anyone, but it is important to understand the big picture of the most common types of violence in the workplace. Most employees know how and where to report concerning behavior. This one's actually a big one for me. I'm going to quote a couple of sources here, but I'm going to talk about it a little bit from experience. First of all, the Society for Human Resource Management conducted a survey. It showed a significant portion of employees are unclear about reporting. And in fact, kind of building on that as well, the U.S. Secret Service National Threat Assessment Center did studies that indicated that many times concerning behavior and those threats go unreported for a variety of reasons. And we'll probably touch a little bit on that today, but in the future, we'll dive further into that because there is kind of this extreme lack of reporting that's going on. We get a lot of great reports in organizations, whether it's to law enforcement or internally to their support teams, their human resources, their threat teams, etc. But there's still a lot that we know that goes unreported. From kind of a personal standpoint on this conversation, I see this a lot. When I'm working with different organizations, I'll many times talk with the leadership team. Those people responsible for safety and security. And the comment from them is, oh yeah, everyone knows because we've put up a piece of paper in every office space that says, call this number if you have concerns. or we've trained them, we've talked about it and said, hey, we have a system set up. And a system, I'm going to go off on a little tangent here for just a minute because it's important. There is the reporting side of it, but there is also the response side of it. So you may applaud yourself, your team, and say, boy, we've done this phenomenal job with reporting. We've posted the telephone number, the anonymous tip line, everything we have all over the organization, and everyone knows about it. Well, is it the end there? Of course not, because what happens is people do report when there is knowledge of a reporting mechanism, but many times it fails on the receiving end. Either the person receiving it doesn't know what to do with it. In some cases, they weren't even dialed in to be on the page of, yeah, you're the person that's going to receive these calls. And so they're surprised when they get these and they don't know what to do with them. Or there are those odd situations that someone's reporting and the receiver just doesn't really know what to do with it. And then taking that to the next level, the response level. So we've had a report, it's been received, and it's been triaged, we'll just say, and goes off to the response mechanism. The response mechanism may be a behavioral threat assessment team. It may be a safety and security team. It may be law enforcement. It may be any different type of response mechanism that takes it from that point. The problem is if they're not fully dialed in, they don't know what their responsibilities are, they don't know what they should be doing, then we're at a loss yet again. So I want you to kind of think of this in big picture terms here of it's really about reporting, receiving, and responding. All three of those have to work in tandem to get the right results. Many times when I'm working with clients, besides seeing things posted around and they're very proud of the fact that they've told everyone how to report, I found that when I talk to the frontline employees, in some cases, and sadly in many cases, they're not aware of exactly that reporting mechanism. Even though I may point out and say, hey, there's a piece of paper on the wall. Oh, never looked at that piece of paper. That does happen. So it's important that we not only have those visual cues of how to report throughout our organization, but we train on it and we send out regular reminders. We let our teams know this is how you report concerns, whether it's concerning behavior or non-emergency things. You know, obviously we hope that if it's an emergency, they're going to go with the expected reporting system, right? 911, or depending on the structure of your organization, maybe it's a direct call to security, those sort of things. But these are those concerning behavior situations where they need to know how to report it. So again, based on my experience and working with so many different organizations over the years, if you are responsible for this, spend time today making sure the visuals are everywhere, making sure that every employee, and don't exclude the part-timers, the temps, the individuals you think, well, the chances are slim. The chances may be slim, but it's that one reporting that can make all the difference. So make sure everyone is trained and aware of it, and you send out regular reminders to that. Mental illness is the primary cause of workplace violence. I hear this a lot. I hear a lot of individuals saying, well, it's all about mental health. It's about mental illness for these individuals that are causing violent attacks. Well, let's kind of break this down. First of all, the American Psychiatric Association has published position statements and research clarifying that mental illness alone is rarely the primary cause of workplace violence. And in fact, there are many times much more significant factors. They could be a history of violence, substance abuse, situational stressors, those sort of things. So it is important that we remember that we can't just default and say, hey, someone has a mental health concern, a mental health illness, so they're going to become violent. That's wrong. Is there a factor there in potential violent attacks? Certainly, but we cannot just label it as that's what it is every single time. There are a lot of other factors. So when we're looking at mitigating those threats, we need to look beyond just a mental illness situation or a mental health concern. We need to be looking at all the other factors. What's going on in their life? What's going on in their work life? Situational stressors, loss of loved ones, loss of financial stability, uh, excessive use of alcohol, substance abuse. Those sort of things are extremely important that we include in our assessments when we're determining the best way to help individuals. So again, my warning to you, my advice to you is don't just go there. The person has mental health concerns. There are many other factors that are many times really the culprit in their planned attack, their threatening behavior, or ultimately their attack. Workplace violence is rare and unlikely to affect most organizations. I think all of us can agree that's a ridiculous myth. Do I hear it out there? I do hear it there quite a bit, where individuals are saying, "Oh, it's not going to happen here. We're very special because we're a tight knit community. We have a great team. Everyone loves us. It's not going to happen here." How many times have I heard that? And I want you to kind of work that through in your head, thinking about those incidents of workplace violence, those active threat incidents, those shooter incidents at some of the smallest, most community oriented organizations where bad things happened. It's not just at big places. And in fact, the Bureau of Labor Statistics consistently reports that workplace violence affects thousands of organizations annually. It's across the board. It's big and it's in different forms, certainly. Those we see on the news involving active violence, specifically shooting incidents, get all the news. But there are countless, thousands of other incidents of workplace violence out there that look much different, right? Because they are an assault, a physical assault on someone. It's a stalking incident. There's countless of these. So keep that in mind, that it does affect organizations across the board and certainly way more than what's been reported. All right. Well, actually, let me add one other thing to that. OSHA as well states that nearly 2 million Americans have been affected by workplace violence. 2 million. Well, that's probably kind of the tip of the iceberg. I don't know how big the iceberg is, but we do know that there are countless incidents of individuals who have not reported, where they have not reported being the victim of a stalking, harassment, maybe a fight in the locker room. We see that all the time. So that number is probably low, but I can't give you a specific number. Bottom line is, it's a lot of people that are affected across the board. No one's immune. No location is immune. It happens across the board. Most workplace homicides are committed by former employees. Well, I think what drives a lot of that is what we see on the news. Now, certainly the news, especially the national news, is only going to focus on those big stories. And of course, they get to decide what the big story is. We may think a huge story is what happened right in our community involving one individual. But on the big national story front, they're looking for the most significant of cases. And many times they do see ones that are involving former employees. Those kind of make for an interesting story. And I hate to use the word interesting because we're talking about death here. We're talking about very serious things that happen to people that affect not only that individual, but their families, their friends, their coworkers, etc. But it is important to remember that in reality, and this is actually coming from the FBI's workplace violence issues and response guide, only about 3% of all workplace homicides are committed by former employees. That's big, even though yet if we went back and we looked at the news, we would probably say, no, it has to be way more than that because I just saw this story about this or that. But the reality is it's only about 3%. So we do have to keep in mind that that is a factor out there, that workplace violence comes from a lot of different sources, and it's certainly not just former employees. I think sometimes when I see threat assessment processes going, I see this kind of focus on let's really look at a former employee versus maybe someone from the outside, a client, a customer, an acquaintance, a spouse, those sort of things. They're all relevant, but keep in mind 3% for workplace violence from former employees. Anytime you crush myths out there, someone is going to argue the counter with you, right? They're always going to say, well, I don't necessarily agree with that. What I try to do in today's episode, and what we'll do in every episode, is to cite some sources so that you can also do research on that as well. And keeping in mind that if you join the Good Squad, our superfans area, you can see many of the reports that I reference in there as well. All in one place. It's a great source. Speaking of the Good Squad, that's where I'm going right now. Into the squad room of the Good Squad. That's the second part of this conversation. I have several more myths to cover today, and we're probably going to do many more of these episodes down the road as well, but there's some great stuff left from today. I'd like you to join me by going to the Good Squad. So the way to get there is go to arewegood.net, arewegood.net, click on the Good Squad, and once you get in there, you'll be able to see this show as well as every other show ad-free. There's some great perks in there. And like I said, we got copies of a lot of these reports, so you don't have to hunt around. It's all right there for you. So we'll see you next time. And don't forget to ask that important question. Are we good?